Hello and welcome to an episode of Savepoint Stories, my podcast where I get a chance to bring on guests and talk about the games that mean a lot to them and their history and experience with that and have a conversation. And we got just one of those episodes today. So this is season 1 of this show. I'm very excited to get this going. Everyone that I have, I mentioned in episode 0, everyone that I've had selected and has agreed to be a part of season 1 is someone who not only I appreciate the stuff that they do, and I think we have a lot of interesting stuff that we're going to get a chance to talk about, but also they've been in my journey of this creative effort and everything leading up to this point. So I'm like, I want to make season 1 sound and feel special to me as much as I want it to feel special for you, the viewer. And with that, let me introduce my guest for today's show, longtime friend, longtime Monster Hunter, G rank in life and in the guild, my buddy Jay.
Hi,
Jay.
Man? How you doing?
Introduce yourself to the viewers.
Yes, I am Jay, Towel Cape Jay, as I go and by the webways. Yes, I am a illustrator, streamer, and general person that people like to bounce ideas off of. But I'm also a huge enthusiast about video games, which is, I think that's why I'm here, right?
That's one of them.
Okay.
For audio listeners too, I encourage you, especially with this episode, to check out at least clips of the video because Jay is a PNG tuber, and he's doing this interview with me and conversation with me as his PNG tuber. That he does. You do streaming, right?
I do streaming. Yes, the PNG tuber is kind of my thing. As my family has told me, I have a face for radio, so I had to draw a good one. So
that's a good way of spinning it.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Can you enlighten our viewers? What do you stream anything in particular? What could they be excited to see you stream? So
I am mostly a art streamer. So I will stream illustrations. I'm on a particular bender with pixel art right now, but every once in a while I will slide in some music work as well. I've been trying to teach myself orchestral arrangements and epic soundtracks, and if you want to watch someone kind of fumble their way around an orchestra, I got you. So.
And also contributor to the show here. I'm gonna the viewers will know that part of the artwork for the show graphic is contributed by you. So thank you for that.
Of course.
We can get more into our history, but I do want to get into the topic of the show, and that is, I bring you on the show. I want to talk to you about what games do mean to you, but I want to talk it through the lens of a game that you pick. And so, Jay, what game have you picked for today's show?
Hands down, Final Fantasy Tactics, the OG, the greatest tactical game ever created. I have to pick that one because there's so much emotion tied to that game. So that's what I bring to the table today.
I'm excited to get into it. And so before we get, one of the things, and this is for the viewers, this is going to be a little bit of a, kind of figuring it as we go, but I'd like to start the show also for those that don't know what Final Fantasy Tactics is. And before we get into our conversation, what is an overview of this game? I want to kind of just nutshell it and showcase that. So Final Fantasy Tactics, War of the Lions particularly, correct, Jay?
Yeah. Yep.
Is a strategy role-playing game in the Final Fantasy series. It was released for PlayStation in June 1997 and has since released in updated versions on the PS Portable, on iOS, on Android platforms. And it was directed by Yasumi Matsuno and produced by Hironobu Sakaguchi. And it was the first strategy role-playing game in the Final Fantasy series. The premise of the game is it's set in Ivalice. I may be butchering this fictional land,
totally are, but it's fine.
They can come after me and bring their complaints. I will make sure I address them. The game is set in this land, a unified kingdom of 7 territories, which is caught in the middle of the War of Lions. Fought between 2 opposing factions vying for rule of the kingdom. The story focuses on Ramza Beowulf, a member of the respected House Beowulf, who finds himself caught amid the war and later uncovers the truth behind a sinister plot behind it. That is the game. Jay, what about this game mean? What do you draw meaning from this? Why does this game mean so much to you?
So like I was raised with the Final Fantasy series, and so for me, I'm used to the sort of like epic storylines, and everything is always like the world is going to end, and this was like one of the first sort of grounded storylines that I actually found in a Final Fantasy series, and it was also the first time where I like viscerally felt like I was in my feelings in this game, man. Like there were so many moments that like that there was like fear, there was joy, there was loathing, there was hatred, and these are just like pixel characters. And I don't know what it was about this sort of tactical layout, the idea that I could actually like make a character in this world that was me, but it just felt different. And I don't know if it was like perfectly timed with how I was growing up and like the summer that I played it, but all of that just kind of lent itself to this game being this like cultural touchstone for me. Like I play it every year like a ritual, and I have to beat it before the end of the summer. Like this.
Well, you brought up like when it may have been when. Let's start there. What was your introduction to this game? Set the scene. Like where were you at in life? How were you introduced to it? I'm very like I think that is very always like that makes a difference on how a game finds you and captivates you and where you're at. So I'm very curious where you.
Okay, all right. So we're several years past the PlayStation era, so I can say this. I had friends who were pirating games. Okay. And this was one of those games where like I was the guy that would go and then rent video games from the stores. So I was constantly on the lookout for stuff. And this was like high school era when this game came out, and I saw it and I remember thinking like this is really cool cover art. And I know as a designer that's me breaking the cardinal rule, don't judge a book by its cover. But it like the cleanliness of the aesthetic for the actual cover of the game was like it's clean white.
You're talking about the PlayStation cover?
The PlayStation cover, yeah.
Okay.
It was a simple, clean white cover with Final Fantasy Tactics in the sort of like classic Final Fantasy font. But instead of doing that sort of like trademark icon, there was just 5 chocobo riders riding toward camera. And like the water that they were riding across with them, like they were riding in a shallow river, just kind of disappeared. And I remember thinking like, this feels different. Like this doesn't feel like the other Final Fantasy games. Like the only other one that stuck in my mind was the Final Fantasy 3/6 cover with Mog standing in on the cover, sort of leaning on a sword. And I was like, that's cool. But this was different. And I remember looking at the cover, I'm like, okay, I'll try this out. And I put it in, and usually when I'm playing these games that my friends have copied, I'll play it for like an hour, and I'll be like, okay, cool, whatever. Like, games were disposable back then because we could get them so quickly. I sat down on Friday afternoon, and I think I stood up Saturday night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like, just full on through. And I hadn't done that since Chrono Trigger. So this was like, and Chrono Trigger is like, if you asked me to choose between my children, it would be Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy Tactics. And so I just remember shedding tears when I played certain parts of Final Fantasy Tactics. So that one beat Chrono Trigger, at least in the regard that was meaningful. So, yeah.
Okay. So that was where you were at in the high school years.
Yeah.
And would you also say, so I'm also curious in this way, what was your experience with that style of game of like, I know you said you had prior history with Final Fantasy games, but was it like one of the first tactics games you've played, or?
Interestingly enough, it was the second tactics game I played.
Okay.
So the first tactics game I played was Ogre Battle, which is sort of like the progenitor to this, except I was fantastically terrible at Ogre Battle. Like, I got my stuff kicked in. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but I got my shit kicked in by that game. I remember thinking, I'm like, there's no way someone plays this game and is like enjoying themselves. And then I played Tactics, and it was like different because it was turn-based, which is something that I know I'm good at. I've beaten every Final Fantasy at this point. Chrono Trigger, I know what I'm doing. All I have to do is get a second to think. And so when I played that in the opening scene, I remember thinking, this is cool as hell. Like, I want all of my games like this. So it was very much like a step back where I was shouting to my brother down the hall. I'm like, you have to come look at this game. You like, seriously, like, what is this? And I remember him thinking like, oh wow, this is really cool. And that was another thing, is that I played it with my brother. Like my older brother and I are like best friends, and so we've played all of the Final Fantasies together. Usually with him in the pilot chair, like, and I would be sitting there navigating him because he gets lost everywhere. So I would tell him, I'm like, you're on this quest, go over there. But this was one of the first ones, and again, why it's meaningful to me. This was one of the first ones where I was player one. Okay. And he was sitting there like, oh, you should make a squire. You should make a knight. Oh, what's a calculator? And that's
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
How was that experience then of like you being in that driver's seat, your brother following? Like, did it just, what was that like? Was that, I know it was a bit of a paradigm shift because it's like, okay, younger brother takes the lead now.
Yeah.
I can relate to that in some ways because with my brother, I was always ahead of him. It was always him using the N64 that I had, the Xbox that I had, but we shared it, but it was always me taking the lead on that in the game choice. And then one year he got the Game Boy Advanced SP with the flip.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, he was ahead of me, and I was like, "Oh, what are you playing? I've never seen this." And it was an interesting dynamic as the older sibling. I'm very curious, how was that for you guys? Like, did it?
It was really strange because it was one of those things where like neither of us knew what we were supposed to do. Like I was sitting there playing the game, and like there's no directions in Final Fantasy Tactics. It's literally just like it's like tactical decisions, right? And so he's just like, oh, if you move the archer there. But then like it was weird for him because he also wanted to play, but he also understood that I got there first. And so it was like, law of like first dibs. So it's just like, all right, man, you're right in this one. Like, let's go. And it was great because like we shared so much of like the victories and losses. Like when we would do a build and it would perform terribly, then we would like go get McDonald's and we'd be sitting there like discussing what went wrong with that build, and then we would try a new team build and then see how it worked, right? And yeah, it was like I said, it's tied to like so many sort of like almost like community moments with me and him because we did this when we played Monster Hunter. Like this is how we know each other. But like Monster Hunter is like the big game me and my brother played together. But that was because we were playing together and not alongside each other in that game.
You're not like passenger gaming with them, kind of like overseeing and cooperatively working, almost like streaming at before streaming was a thing.
Yeah, exactly. But then like with Tactics, this was like it gave us that same level of camaraderie. It was actually the first camaraderie we had with this, because then like once I got to college, that's when I got into the like Monster Hunter PSP world.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's a whole other can of worms we could maybe get into in the future. Because
that's a different episode, buddy.
That is because I mean, this is another thing going back to our friendship and history.
Yeah.
I had a Monster Hunter meetup, and it was because I wanted more people. I didn't know anyone that was playing it. And I think the idea of meetups was a new thing.
Yeah.
And to me, at least, it was like meetup.com, and you're like using it. People use it for all kinds of things, interests and relationships and all stuff. And I was using it to just be like, let's meet friends that want to just co-op and play. Because back then, also Monster Hunter, which is now an online cooperatively played game.
Yeah.
Back then was just purely portably and locally played, almost like the old Pokemon games with Game Link cables, akin to that. And we met there. You were one of the folks that showed up, and our friendship has existed since then. And that was, man, more than
10 years ago. Yeah, dude.
Somewhere around there. So I very much see like that camaraderie and how it can bring people together and form relationships or strengthen them.
Yeah.
So here's another question. You talked about how you shed tears in this game. I'm curious, just like how it made you emotional. Like, what was that impact like? Because I feel like games for me back then, at least when I was in high school, it was very rare. Like we see so many cinematic quality games now.
Yeah.
For a game to actually move you at that era and that time and to have stories and things, I'm curious. Like, what was I very much want to know what you think.
So, okay, a lot of this kind of goes back to like when I played the game. So it was high school.
Okay. Set the scene.
What you need to understand about me at high school was that I went to high school very far away from where I went to middle school.
Okay.
My parents wanted me to have good education, so they're like, hey, let's go ahead and send you here where you know no one and you are a no one. And you can imagine that when you are like that, it's going to be a bad time, right? Like, this sounds like your typical high school trope. The thing was, I moved from a poor neighborhood to a rich neighborhood high school.
Okay.
And so I was very much a peasant. And guess who else is a peasant? Yeah.
Protagonist.
Yeah, the protagonist. Yeah. Well, so in the game, like, so Ramza is not a peasant. He's a noble, but his best friend, Delita, is in fact a peasant, and I related so deeply with him, where he was just filled with anger, right? He was in a school with a bunch of people that were basically given silver spoons. He was trying to be the best knight that he could be, but everyone felt like he was undeserving to be there. And I was like, damn, like this hits pretty hard for me, but like that's not what moved me to tears. What moved me to tears can be sort of summarized in 2 words. Fuck Algus. Like, fuck that guy. because the moment, and this is just chapter 1, this is the thing that kills me. This, like, it got me there with just the first chapter. Like, the moment when Delita's sister was killed, and the rich guy that was already picking on Delita was basically like, peasants are worth less than dirt. Like, their lives are nothing. And I was just like, I have never been so motivated to murder a dude in a game. Like, I remember during one of my replays, I made it a point to level up as high as humanly possible so I could drop a meteor on this fool in chapter 1. Like,
oh my god! And have you been able to accomplish that?
I have, yeah. I was beating chocobos for like hours just so that I could like pull up that level up experience, and like got to like ultimate monk class so that it was just one shot 999 punch. And for no reason other than I have like this like generational trauma to this fool that I'm like, wow. I need to end this guy. Yeah, no, I distinctly remember like that moment. I was like actually choked up at a game that I was just like, because this guy went on this diatribe about like how people that are not born of noble birth are worth less than nothing. And like I was going through it in high school. So like being able to kind of like I was that kid that got beat up every day for like 3 years out of high school, and it only stopped because the guys that beat me up graduated. And I played this around my like sophomore, junior year, so it was like right in between the beatings that this happened. And
you hadn't learned the meteor attack yet.
I hadn't. No. Well, that's a whole other thing.
Oh, okay, let's circle back on that one.
Yeah. But I mean, like, and this isn't really a spoiler. The game is over 20 years old at this point. But Delita is like both the protagonist and eventual antagonist of the storyline. So, like, I don't know. It was there's definitely like a hero's journey for me where I got to see like his growth. And like this was also the moment that inspired me to start writing, like actual writing stories.
Wow. Okay. Well, I know you have a writing history. I didn't know that it stemmed back to Final Fantasy Tactics.
I told you, man, this game's got levels on me.
You weren't kidding. Yeah, okay. No, I'm very curious. In what way did it really get you in that regard?
So, interestingly enough, so my junior year, so this was after the summer after I'd beaten the game the first time. Okay. I was given a creative writing it was a creative writing assignment where basically the teacher was like, I want you to write a piece from the point of view of a character from any one of our stories that we've read. And we'd been studying Shakespeare. We'd been studying like all of the greats. And I distinctly remember thinking, I would love to write it from Delita's point of view. Okay. And I brought it to her and she was like, we didn't study a video game. So can you find another character that you would relate to amongst, all of these other sort of like literary folks? And I was like, Iago from Othello. She's like, yeah. She's like, it's an interesting choice. You're writing it from an antagonist point of view. And I was like, I remember saying this to her and she just kind of looked at me and just smiled. I was like, an antagonist is a point of view. It's not a person. And she like looked at me and she was like, run with that.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. And so I wrote possibly one of the best pieces of creative writing I've ever written. It was literally a goodbye graduation speech from Iago.
Okay.
Like, basically calling Othello out for all of his bullshit, all of the wrongs that he ever felt, and like kind of telling his story. But it was really me just kind of working my trauma out at a school that like treated me like trash.
Wow.
And I was like channeling Delita. I was channeling all that stuff. I think, unfortunately, that teacher passed away back in like 2019. But I remember like reaching out to her, and she's like, I still use your piece as the example for that test.
Wow.
Like, I still show it to people because it was so moving. And I was like, yeah, I was working through some shit.
It came from somewhere.
Yeah.
It came from someone real.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Wow. Do you know of anyone like when you reached out and she said that, like, I don't know what went through your head of like, man, I never knew. Like, I can't imagine you would have been like, I see myself playing this game, writing this story, and then hearing about something years back later.
Dude, it struck me like like the meteor that I threw at Algus eventually. No, but seriously, like it was one of those things where I was like, I couldn't fathom that something that I had written was considered good enough that someone was using it as an example, and that it was like the understanding of, you know, how you can generate emotion and empathy through a character. Even someone as, like, honestly deplorable as Iago. Like, he sucked. If you read Othello, he was a trash person. But, like, if you kind of tried to get into his head and actually give him a little bit of grace and understand why he was doing it, you really could understand him. And I feel like that was the thing that got me, right? Is like everyone's kind of got their own story. Like with Final Fantasy Tactics, their whole shtick was they're like, we're telling you the legend of the heretic. And like they're coming at it from the standpoint like, you have been lied to your whole lives. The protagonist was actually, the antagonist was actually the protagonist. And this has all just been a cover up. And I'm just like, yeah, it's just a point of view. And that was like... That was it for me. I like every story I've written has always explored those kinds of things where it's always just kind of like looking at it from a point of view as opposed to. Yeah.
Here's a question. This is something I know about you. You also enjoyed dabbling in the tabletop space as a is it a DM or GM? I don't know what the proper vernacular is.
Depends on the system, but I would say it's GM just because that's like the more general one. But yeah.
What, just to historically, again, I'm kind of maybe going down a rabbit hole. Like you were introduced and you pursued creative writing, and that opened doors in that space, as I know you've done.
Yeah.
When was your exploration and kind of dabbling in tabletop games like that, like as a GM, around the same time in correlation with this, or subsequently followed in its own journey?
So the world that my players play in right now, even in ongoing games and in the past games that I've been known for, were inside of the world that was created 2 summers after I graduated from high school. So like the creative writing from that stemmed into creating Lum, which is the reason why like I think my players like it as much, because I've literally been working on this thing for like 15, 20 years and just like building it out. And so they're like, yeah, so what's the tax structure like in of the Silver Sages? And I'm like, it's actually just a flat amount that's taken from every. And they're like, you have an answer for that? And I was like, well, yeah.
Who's running for office this year?
Yeah. Like, depends. What season are we playing right now? Like, yeah, no, it's wild.
That's insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
To see like. One, to see you move from like the story points and how it shaped like your relationships with your brother in specific, but also to see your creative habits and ambitions kind of take shape out of this. That's a lot for this game. Like I knew it meant something. I didn't know it was, like you said, the layers to it. You weren't kidding.
Yeah.
I do have a question about the game though.
Sure.
If you had to really, and I know you've talked to many parts, and there's no like, it doesn't make any other parts less good. But if you had to say what your favorite thing about this game is, what would your answer be?
So interestingly enough, the cutscenes.
Oh, okay. I'm familiar with this game. I have I will plead guilty and say that I have not finished it.
Okay.
But and I can see.
All right. So wait. Okay, go on.
And see, this is again with the audio listeners. You're missing out on some great moments.
I'm just upset, man. Okay, just. Okay.
I revisit it all the time, and it for me the things I love of it are. I love the story, and I feel like I've done myself a crime by not finishing that element.
Yeah.
Especially after hearing so much of what you said. But also, I just love how it plays and how it feels. And the scene it sets is that intro cinematic and several others. Mm-hmm. I love the artwork in this game. And yeah. So speak to me about these cutscenes.
Well, okay. So those of us that were raised with the Super Nintendo era of pixel art, right? The idea of a character killing another character, that is, one character doing a slashing animation, the other one doing a hit animation, and they fall over, right? There's no interaction. Those things are sort of animated, and this gets down to me being a designer and being really nerdy about this shit. But they're separate actions, and it doesn't feel connected. In Tactics, one of the first things I ever saw was Delita punching Algus in the face. And not even punching him in the face in such a way where it's one is an action and the other one is separately animated. He connects with this fool's head, and Ramza goes and grabs Delita's arm and pulls him back. And all of the sprites are fully interacting with one another. And I remember my mind just exploding because I was like, what is happening? Are they doing some other new voodoo? Because if you understand pixel animation, when you have two objects interact with one another, it's usually just one giant sprite that you're putting together. And they did this whole new system for this game where they had a sprite for the arm, the head, the chest, the legs, so that they could do these complex animations almost like a 3D rig and have them interact with one another. And it is crazy. It isn't even just that one. You have characters that are slumped against walls. You have blood spatter across things. You have someone literally being picked up and their neck broken and thrown off of a cliff. And it's all just I was I would watch just all of this. I was playing the game just to get from one scene to the next. And you don't understand how mad I was when they cut a bunch of those for the War of the Lion remakes.
Oh, really?
They put FMVs in, which is fine. I love the artwork. The concept artist for this is just one of my favorite people. But they cut some of the real time animation out, and I was like, "What are you doing?"
So wait, maybe this is my lack of knowledge. I've only experienced the PSP version, the War of the Lions version, which came later. I didn't realize. So are those sketched animation styles at the beginning? Added later?
They weren't in the original. They were not in the original.
Interesting. Okay, I did not know that. And not only were they added, you saying they make cuts.
Yeah, they made cuts. There's this pretty moving scene where Delita is talking to Alma, Ramza's sister, in a field with ruins.
Okay.
And they animated the whole thing. And if I had just played the PSP version, I would have been fine with it. But I'd played the PS1 version, and I knew exactly what was missing, which was a fully animated sort of sprite sequence on a field that looked like it could be a battle map. And so, that was the other thing, is when they did the cutscenes like that, you kind of were filled with trepidation, because it means that they made a battle map. It's kind of like in D&D, where it's hey, I'm going to bring out a map, and all my players just collectively gasp, because they're just oh no, are we about to get into a fight? Same thing, but they animated it. The characters were walking through the grass, interacting with one another. Yes, it wasn't as well constructed or cinematography wise as the fully animated thing, but it had its own sort of special quality because it was animated in engine, right? It made the characters have its own life. So yeah,
no, it's beautiful stuff, and I didn't know the intricacies of that. I have another question in that. You say you return to this every year, and you finish it every year.
Yep.
What started that, and what continues to drive that for you?
It was that sort of social discussion that I had with my brother, where we were what kind of lunatic build could we try, right? So
oh, okay. So you try new builds with it every time you do the new runs? Or?
Yeah. So we would just do these lunatic runs, where my brother was we should just do one that's all knights. And I'm like, all knights? He's like, all knights. I'm like, I don't like. There's certain like actual conflicts in the game that are explicitly detrimental to certain builds, and so I'm like, all right, yeah, let's do it. Like, I'm like, knight with like a sword. And he's like, yeah. So I'm like, does that include dark knight? He's like, I mean, if you can get that class before that fight, yeah. I'm like, okay, like that sort of stuff. And then we were like, what if we beat the game with no weapons? No weapons? No weapons. Okay, and that started our monk run. And then we realized that Monk is like this super broken OP character. And we're just like, oh.
As soon as I had a character unlocked to be able to do the Monk class, I was like, I love this class. This is my go-to for every confrontation.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that was like the other thing is like class structure in the game where you could pick different classes. Like that level of customization in a game did not exist.
That was my first introduction to the job class system in video games.
Yeah.
And I've chased that ever since that game.
I've just been chasing that dragon, man, just trying to find it.
Because so many games try to replicate, and I question myself as to what the rationale is of enjoying that.
Yeah.
And I think some elements of it are the role playing aspects of I like these personalities, but I want to customize and choose. Because again, you're controlling the whole party. I want to really optimize not just my character, whoever I'm supposed to be the main protagonist in the game, and be like, this is what I'll be. This is who I want everyone to be. Their identities remain the same as a person, but because of that, in my eyes, I interpret that as you are a protector. You're always in front of the conversation. You're always speaking to okay, to me, that means protector. To someone else, that could mean a warrior. To someone else, that could mean a supporting kind of role. And I love that level of that's very much your version and this is very much mine without losing who they are.
Yep.
I have the closest I've received to getting to a game like this in that way has been Metaphor Refantasio recently.
Really?
But again, it stems back to no one has done it as good as this. Like this is still the king at the top of the hill.
Yes.
When you play with your brother, when you do that yearly thing, it sounds like it's very involved with your brother. It's a collaborative effort.
It's fallen off in the last few years because my brother has kids, so it's tricky.
His own party.
Yeah, he has his own party, which is fine. Like we play there's other traditions that have kind of come out of that.
Okay,
like when we both got married, it started to dip, and it just became like. But then I would message him, I'm like, Did you beat it this year? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, what'd you run? Right? And it's almost like this retroactive sort of like discussion now.
Oh, so you're saying that like you are both potentially playing it in your own runs?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but do you ever do you ever have it where it's like kind of like how you did as a kid, where it's you, for instance, doing the run, and he's giving you. It sounded like from what I was understanding, he was also like, this is what you should do on your next run.
Yes, that unfortunately ended in college. Like
gotcha.
Once the distance got to us, it was kind of tricky to actually like sit there and do that. But like we would still play. Like we would talk back and forth. I'm like, hey, are you trying this build? He's like, I'm trying this build. What are you trying? Right. And like the funny thing was, this was before either of us ever thought to be like, what's the meta? Like, no, it was just like, let's just make something stupid. I did one where like I basically, and this was true for a very long time, I stopped using Ramza. I made him enough of a utility that like in those scenes where he had to be the only one fighting, he wouldn't be a complete idiot. Okay. But for the most part, I never used hero characters.
And so what you're meaning is like, and this is, I'm kind of just making sure for those that don't know, is when you go into any given skirmish or battle, you get a choice of who you're bringing in the party of that fight. Yep. So you made a choice to not include the main character of the game in as many times as you could.
Yes. Well, I mean, they require you to use him, but then I wouldn't use any of the
you stay in that corner.
Exactly. I would like if it wasn't a storyline fight that like was going to require him to do all the heavy lifting, I would just switch him to a white mage, and then I would field my team of like NPCs that I'd created. Okay. And they all had their own story. We had a rule that if they went down, they were wounded, and you're not allowed to. It was basically like a Nuzlocke run, but in tactics. And so if they were ever taken down, not even like if they like zeroed out their count and disappeared, if they were taken down, they were wounded and were not allowed to be fielded again. Wow. And so, yeah, that was so many reloads.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The next thing I was going to ask you was, loving this game so much with your brother, like, have you met others that, like, is there a community for this as well? Like, did you commiserate in any way of, like, who else is out there that loves these games? Or I don't know, like, just in any sense of, like, a larger community behind this game, and, like, what is your relationship with that?
So, okay, barring the fact that you haven't finished this game, which we will discuss later on.
Bonus episode.
Yeah. I don't know how it happened, but inadvertently, I have like these four. We call ourselves the old men because it's four of us that all hang out, and we meet up once a year, and we're all pretty varied. One is like my best friend Mike, who is like possibly the smartest human I've ever met, but he's also a complete weirdo. He loves Final Fantasy Tactics. That was something that we bonded over because I met him during the formative years when I, found this game. He was one of those friends that I handed the game to. But then his two really good friends from college that I became really good friends with also played the game. And it was one of those things where we're like, you like Final Fantasy Tactics? Did we just become best friends? Like, yeah. So I mean, that was kind of as far as it went, and it was funny because I used it as like a secret litmus test whenever I would talk to people, and I would just be like, "Oh, have you ever played Final Fantasy Tactics?" And if they like jumped over their chair and lost their shit, I was like, "Okay, do you want to join my tribe?"
I've had a similar experience as you. Anytime I've ever tested the waters of like you have with introducing this game as like, how do you vibe with this?
Yeah,
it's never been, yeah, I'm into it. It's always been either, no, I haven't played it, or like I don't like it, or this is the best. Like this has got, this has changed me in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And I love that about this game's personality with how it has interacted with people in that way. That's so cool.
Yeah. It's not just me. there's something about this that like affects people. So
okay, so here's a question for you, and this is kind of getting more. I want to get a little bit into the nerdiness of this game and this lineage of this game. It's been sought after. I know for me, for many, it's been talked about a modern day, like, many try to reapply the tenets of it with triangle strategy having come out with some elements of it, and
so
other
upsetting.
Yeah, not the same experience, but
no.
What would you like? How is it? Would you want a updated, newer version of this game in some shape or form? And if so, we'll paint the picture of what that looks like to you as like the best way of that could be.
Oh man. Okay. So honestly, if they were to ever remake this game,
yes,
I would want them to have the straight up normal like gameplay of like the first game, or of the game where you're playing as Ramza. I would love for an optional Delita mode where you play through his storyline, because there's so much of his storyline that is just like, what the hell are you even doing, bro? Like, why would you do that? And like, there's been so many weird kind of like glitches, and I've been chasing this dragon. Like, there are these weird glitches in the game that will sometimes have you playing a random fight, and I've only been able to reproduce it twice in like 20 plus years of trying this. And it was like, literally like, here is this random secret fight where you're like murdering one of the bishops in the game, and I'm like, that was never shown in the game. And you're playing as like Delita, and I was like, did they just leave this in? Is this like some weird glitch from like the burned copy of the game that I was playing? But that sort of lit a fire where I was like, God, I would just play all of that. I would just want to understand how Delita got, like, how did he get this weird hot assassin as a teammate? How did he like rise to power? How did he find himself in such a place that he could like murder 3 dukes and a bishop? Like, what did you do, dude? And it would just be so fascinating to like play that side of the game. Yeah.
I'm sold. I love what you've presented. I have a few ideas that could go into that, but also I want to keep painting this picture. No, we're staying on this.
All right.
Is it still staying, or like, how does it look? Is it still an old school looking game? Is it modernized in any way akin to the Final Fantasy Rebirth and remake, or?
I would want it to keep it to its like sort of noble roots.
Okay.
That being said, I would not be mad at a remake where you kind of gave it the Octopath treatment, where there was like a depth of field so you could rotate the camera around.
Kind of that HD 2D pixelation.
Yeah, and have like those really like big cinematic attack, because some of the moves in the game are wild.
Yeah.
Like cross strike, all these like crazy things like Dark Blade, and like animating them in that sort of style that Octopath had, where it was like these really over the top like particle effects with like cool camera zooms in and crap like that. I would love that. Like that would just be chef's kiss. I would play the living hell out of that game.
I think I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I think some level of I'm not sure, but I'm wondering what you think of like voice acting being included.
Oh yeah.
That'd be interesting with the performances that like, I don't know if it would take away from what I've already imagined or if it would add more to it with those scenes voiced. I
think it would add to it. The only thing that it would break the immersion, and this is me talking to like 14-year-old Jay that was playing this, is like, I think it would break the ability to self-insert, right?
Yeah.
Like when Delita was saying things, I was saying them, right?
Yeah.
And like I felt that character. And so that would be the only thing. Like part of me would also want to watch it as like an anime, so I would probably put the subtitle, like the VAs in Japanese, and put subtitles on.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah. Because then I could still self-insert, because I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's the Japanese voice actor. That's not me.
And here's because I know this was its own story, but they've done subsequent Final Fantasy Tactics games across other platforms, but it's always been a different story.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the idea and the concept of this? Like, do you think there's ever an opportunity for a sequel to this game as opposed to a remake, a re-envisioning or something?
I think a sequel is fully possible, mainly because like Square
Enix, maybe even prequel
even, yeah. But Square Enix likes Ivalice. Like there are multiple games in this world.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't be one of those things where they're just like, oh yeah, I guess we'll do a sequel as a one-off. Like that's the thing that kills me about Tactics. Tactics was a throwaway game for them. They were like, let's try this weird experimental strategy thing. Let's throw our zaniest writer. Let's throw our craziest orchestrator. Like let's just do that. Yeah. And it turned into a thing that they're like, okay, I guess we're just going to revisit this. Like, I forget which Final Fantasy it was that's in Ivalice, but I think it's like 13 or 12. I don't know.
Okay.
But they like the world still exists. It's in the same sort of like timeline. It's like much more in the future though. I think the other Final Fantasy. But so there's a continuum there though. Like there's references to Ramza and the War of the Lions and the Great Heretic like in that storyline. And so I was like, Square Enix clearly cares about this world. So yeah, I would think a sequel would totally work.
Your idea about that other perspective being captured in some additional way on a remake, I'm almost thinking it could be its own game.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And so
yeah.
I love either version of that or some version of that where you could maybe do both, or you could do one in its own thing kind of thing. Or
yeah.
But I've been frothing at the mouth for a Final Fantasy Tactics return of some sort.
Well, like,
what do you? Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead.
The ultimate fan cast would be a alternate reality kind of thing that I would love to play through, where it's like instead of like it kind of like the Marvel what ifs, right?
Okay.
Like, okay, so let's play Final Fantasy Tactics, but what if Ramza was the one that got killed? Like, who would the protagonist? Would it be Alma? Would she step up? Would Delita still go bad because now his best friend died instead of his sister, right? Like, what is that alternate story? Like, August still dies because fuck August, but like, like, you know, there's so many moments where like there's been clearly two roads in this game, and like it would just be so cool to understand like what would have been a different choice for the characters and like where that could have gone. Like, this is me being like, there's no way they could make this game, but what if you could play it as an almost choose your own adventure where it's like the choice you make alters the storyline, and then there's new branches of story, and it's like this is now I'm merging my favorite things. What if there are multiple?
Please do.
What if there are multiple endings? What if it's the Chrono Trigger effect, where it's like you get to the end of Tactics, and then you can like warp back, and at any moment you can make the pivotal change, and then it runs the storyline in a different direction, and then you get a different ending. And then
you've introduced New Game Plus to this.
Exactly. And then you get more cutscenes, which are the things that I crave, that I need. So
No, I love all this. I guess I want to also ask, given the visual expression you made of the mention of the other Tactics games, what are the thoughts there?
Wait, what do you mean? As far as like the
visuals? you had an expression of the other games. Is there? Do they not hit for you? Is it lacking?
Not.
Is it?
They don't. They neutered it. That's the thing that killed me. Is that they like. So Final Fantasy Tactics is like this low fantasy medieval adventure that tells very nuanced discussions about religion and like politics and like the struggle between the rich and poor and all this sort of stuff like that. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is about 3 kids that get stuck in the never-ending story and have to fight their way out. And I don't like it. I don't like that they were like, oh, let's make this kind of like super like sane washed thing that is like nice and happy and kid accessible. It's like the first 3 episodes of Star Wars. Like it's upsetting and it's pandering, and I don't like it.
I see. I feel like I'm curious how it you would have received it had you played that first. If it had come out first or in any way, and then gone to the next step, which was the more mature, more challenging ideas and themes.
I think I would have been more accepting of it. I think the fact that they did it as like that was the quote unquote sequel.
Yeah.
I think that's what hurt it for me, because I was just like, you guys created this magical, wonderful thing, and then you crapped the bed. And I'm like, why did you do that? Like you could have kept going. Whereas like if they started with crapping the bed, then Tactics would have been this like pinnacle of achievement that they moved up to, as opposed to retreated from.
Sure.
And that's the thing. And I know Tactics Advanced is like a loved sort of series for some people, but there's also a reason why they never made any more, because it did actually like fizzle the franchise out. And it's like you said, they tried to do it with like Triangle Strategy. They're like, hey, you want heroes, right? Every character is a hero. I'm like, no, that's the opposite of what I wanted. Like, that ticks me off to no end, by the way. Like, I played it, I was like, this is it, guys, this is it, we're so back. I get it, and it's like every character is a hero, you're not allowed to make your own self-insert. I'm like, no. Like, why? So yeah. It's
okay. I have one final question for you, Jay.
Sure.
What is this year's run? What is the theme?
So I was actually going to try to do an all Squire run this year.
Okay. What is that? Is that's one of the job classes? Yeah.
That is the first job class, my dude.
Oh, okay. Now, it's almost like in the Dark Souls community, like a soul level 1 or a blood level 1.
Yeah.
Like
yes.
Big base class.
So here's the thing that most people usually do for a Squire run, though, is they'll multi-class and then only use Squire for like the major conflicts. But so they'll get the benefits of the multi-class. So for instance, like they'll multi-class into Monk, which will give them a plus 20 like attack on anything. And then they'll equip that, but then they'll switch the class back to Squire and then try to then do the run.
I see.
I'm going to do a pure Squire run.
No multi-classing.
No multi-classing.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I do want to check in with you at a later date when that run takes place. I want to, and what I will do, because this is something that I've been trying to be better about. Mm-hmm. There's been games on my bucket list over these past years. Persona 5 Royal was one of them. Death Stranding was another. Mm-hmm. I think my task, based on also on your expression for this year, is to finally complete this game. So I'll make it a point to try to chip away at that and we'll have another discussion of my thoughts on that.
I have a question for you. How far did you get?
The honest last attempt I made was when my PSP was still working, and mind you, the lengths I went to get this game when I first discovered it.
Yeah,
I went and found just some guy. Like, I couldn't afford a PSP, like at retail. Someone at my Jace Junior College was selling their PSP for $30 to $40 because it had broken parts in it. And I said yes, because there's a chance I could just spend this $30, $40, learn anything I could. And I did learn the things I needed to and find the parts I needed to. And I've salvaged that thing. And it's fully functional now. Barring local play, like if I had a game that did like Monster Hunter, I wasn't able to do local play, for instance. But that didn't matter for Final Fantasy Tactics. So I was like, mission accomplished, success. I made it. I can finally play this game because I never had a PlayStation. I was like, this is my entry into that, being able to play this game. So I went to great lengths to play this game. I got to the point where it was, I don't remember the story beat, but I just remember it was kind of open to, hey, you can just do a bunch of skirmishes. And I just did skirmishes because I loved the battles. I was like, I was trying to unlock different classes because I was enamored with the job class system and everything. So I can't tell you exactly story beat where I was, but I just know I was at that point in the game where it's kind of opened up.
So like, you know how I started with fuck Algus?
Yes.
There is another character, and he requires the same treatment. Fuck Ygraph. Fuck Ygraph. Mainly because this was one of those fights in the game where you're just like, so the game's cheating, right? I'm supposed to lose this fight. And no, sir, you are not supposed to lose that fight. That is the thing that has ended so many of my runs, because so many builds don't work against that fight.
Interesting. Okay, I'll keep that in mind when I go into that.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more.
You'll meet Ygraph and you'll be like, oh no.
And then you'll get a text from me.
Yeah.
Fuck this game.
It'll be like the text I got from my buddy when he was watching Game of Thrones, and like I'd finished reading it already. And he was like, you didn't tell me about the Red Wedding? And I'm like, no, sir, I didn't. Are you okay?
You want to talk about it?
Are you somewhere safe? Yeah. Nice.
Well, thank you, Jay, for telling us so much about your history with Final Fantasy Tactics.
My pleasure, man.
I knew you had a passion for it. I just never knew to what lengths, and it was so, like, hearing your relationship with your brother, hearing your passions, hearing your journey, and hearing everything that was very enlightening and so cool. And thank you for bringing that to the table. Is there anything you want to close with, or any thoughts?
We didn't even get to scratch the surface of the concept art, but Akihiko Yoshida, it was like such a pivotal influence on my artwork that literally, if you took some of my artwork from back then and you looked at it, you'd be like, oh my god, this guy was literally just copying from this playbook. Okay, so that was one. I know that's too far deep in. The other side of it is just like, play this game, man. Like, please.
Finish this game.
Finish this game. Well, and to anyone who is listening that has not played this game, it will hold up. It will hold up. I tell you right now, it will. Like, trust me. It is still a good game, even by today's standards. So, yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you, Jay. Is there anything you want to plug, and where can people find you?
Sure. I am the Cape Brigade on Twitch and Instagram and Blue Sky. I am currently in the middle of a 52 weeks of Monsters run. Like I said, I'm getting real deep into pixels. And so we started this week with goblins. I think next week is orcs and gelatinous cubes. If you want to come check that out, please stop by. But yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Jay. And be sure to check out Jay on his streams and at his socials. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of Savepoint Stories, where I have guests on. They talk about a game that means a lot to them, and we talk about the stories and experiences that went along with that. So again, thank you again, and we'll see you on the next episode of Season 1 of Savepoint Stories.
Yeah. See you guys.